Her daughter thought the search history was private. Legal ways to remove elderly parents glared from the glowing laptop screen. Helen Porter didn't confront her. She documented everything. By the time Claire filed her guardianship petition, Helen had already rewritten the will. No name, no claim, no mercy. The only thing her daughter inherited was silence and a locked front gate. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The guest room still smelled like lavender and linen spray, Claire's signature blend. Helen stepped in quietly, barefoot on the hardwood, carrying the hardcover she'd borrowed. The Dutch house, spine softened from years of handling. Claire had asked for it back this morning, all sweet politeness over coffee. "No rush, Mom, just when you have a minute." It was a small thing, a returned book. But Helen had learned over the years that small things often sat on top of landmines. The sun filtered through sheer curtains, casting pale stripes across the bed. Claire's MacBook was half open, the screen still glowing. Idle, but not asleep. Helen leaned forward to place the book on the desk, and then she saw it. The search bar at the top of the screen glared at her like a verdict. Legal ways to remove elderly parents from property. For a moment, Helen stood still. She blinked. Her breath caught between inhale and exhale, suspended. Maybe this isn't what it looks like. Maybe she was researching for a friend, a paper, something. She moved the trackpad slightly. The screen brightened. Related searches. Power of attorney without consent. How to declare a parent incompetent. Elder law eviction process. The blood in Helen's ears roared suddenly loud. She hadn't heard it approach, that slow thump of betrayal. It didn't hit like fear. Not yet. It hit colder than that. Slower. Like a knife wrapped in ice. She didn't touch the keyboard, just reached into her sweater pocket, pulled out her phone and snapped a photo of the screen. Then another, from a slightly different angle. Evidence had to be time-stamped. Her hands didn't shake, not even a tremor. She closed the laptop carefully, quietly, as if not to wake something alive. Downstairs, the grandfather clock let out a soft chime. 5 o'clock. Dinner was at 6. Roasted chicken. Haricots verts. Claire had added lemon slices for aesthetics. She always cooked like she was waiting for a magazine photographer to arrive. The table was set perfectly, of course. White napkins, folded like cranes. Crystal water goblets Helen hadn't seen since Thanksgiving. "Everything okay, Mom?" Claire asked, sliding the serving plate in front of her. "You're awfully quiet tonight." Helen smiled. "Just thinking, this chicken smells amazing." Claire beamed like a pageant contestant. "Well, John helped. We're a team now." John nodded, chewing. He looked tired, as he always did after spending the day at the office pretending not to resent the house he lived in. Helen reached for the salad bowl and passed it to her daughter. "You've always liked green beans." Claire laughed lightly. "Yeah. You made me eat them when I was 6 until I cried, remember?" "I remember," Helen said. "You always had a dramatic streak." Claire tilted her head, eyes narrowed just enough to catch the insult. "Well, I turned out fine, didn't I?" "You did," Helen agreed, spooning food onto her plate. "You've turned out exactly how I expected." Across the table, John looked up for a moment. Something about Helen's voice had shifted, almost imperceptibly. "Almost." Claire twirled her fork. "I mean, sure, I've had to fight for some things, but that's what strong women do. You taught me that." Helen nodded. "I taught you a lot of things." Silence settled like fog. Even the grandfather clock seemed to hesitate before striking the half hour. Then Claire clapped her hands lightly. "Anyway, I was thinking, maybe this weekend we could take a little drive up to that new condo development by the lake. Just to look. No pressure." John reached for the wine. He poured too much into his glass. Helen cut a piece of chicken. "Why would I want to look at condos?" Claire shrugged. "No reason. Just thought you might enjoy being closer to your own age group." The insult slid across the table like a silk scarf. Delicate. Dangerous. Helen chewed slowly, eyes fixed on her daughter. She swallowed, then dabbed at her mouth with the napkin. "I'm quite comfortable where I am," she said evenly. Claire smiled again, too quickly. "Of course, just offering." Helen returned the smile. Not motherly, not warm, but razor sharp. "How thoughtful of you." John coughed. Claire laughed. The sound was bright, artificial. Helen finished her wine in one long sip, her eyes never leaving her daughter's face. Later that night, while the house creaked in the wind and John snored in the guest suite, Helen sat at her desk in her bedroom. The photo of the search history glowed on her phone. She enlarged it with her fingers, reading each line again. She tapped the screen once to bookmark it, then tapped again. She wants a fight, Helen thought. Fine, let's make it a fair one. The silver key clicked into the lock with a sound that hadn't echoed through the house in years. Helen hadn't touched the document safe since the winter after Miles died. Dust coated the dial like old regret. She wiped it clean with her sleeve, turned the combination carefully. Right, left, right, like she was winding back time. The safe door opened with a low groan. Metal, memory, and Miles. Inside, folders leaned in tight rows like old soldiers. One box sat at the back, wrapped in twine, brittle and faded. Her fingers found the label in Miles's handwriting. Porter Estate, Final Revision. She slid it out, sat cross-legged on the carpet, and opened it. The first sheet was the deed. Her name, Helen Porter, typed in bold beside sole owner. No cosigners, no contingencies. Miles had been thorough, meticulous to the point of paranoia. He'd outlived his father by 40 years and never forgot the way property had nearly torn the family apart. They'd promised never to do that to Evan, or to each other. Helen flipped through the trust documents, medical directives, power of attorney paperwork, all with her name at the helm. Claire's name appeared only once, listed under next generation beneficiary, to be released at grandchild's maturity, 25 years. She didn't smile, just nodded once like she'd expected it but needed the confirmation. She was the legal wall. Tucked behind the final page was a folded yellow legal pad, Miles' handwriting again, bold, no-nonsense strokes. If you're reading this, she's already trying. Don't let her. You know how she smiles when she lies. Helen's breath caught. Not a sob, not even a tear, just a deep pull of air that shook slightly on the exhale. He'd seen it coming. She kept reading. Bullet points, circled phrases. One line underlined twice. Emotional manipulation is not a legal argument. Keep everything documented. Helen stood, documents in hand, and walked back to her desk with purpose. The same rhythm she used when lesson plans were due, when Miles had chemo appointments, when the world asked too much but she still showed up. She opened the black accordion binder she once used for taxes, peeled off the old label, replaced it with one she wrote herself, in blue ink, active. Each document slipped into a fresh sleeve. Deed, trust, medical directive, revised will. The yellow legal note went last, tucked in the back behind the originals like a quiet voice whispering, "Keep going." She opened her email. Her fingers moved without hesitation now. To David Kravitz. Subject, urgent, Porter Estate. David, I need to meet, tomorrow if possible. Claire's behavior has shifted. She's initiating legal positioning. I have documentation. I believe we need to revisit the estate shield we discussed in 2019. Helen. She clicked send. The weight in her chest didn't lift, but it shifted, reorganized itself into resolve. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the maple branches against the window pane. The house made its usual nighttime complaints, pipes ticking, floorboards stretching, but now it felt less like creaking and more like warning. Helen sat back in her chair and opened the final drawer on the right, the one no one but Miles had ever really used. Inside was a flash drive, still in its plastic wrap. Label in Miles's neat script, open only if declared incompetent. She held it between her fingers, cold, compact, a legal flare gun. She didn't open it, just placed it next to the binder, then turned off the desk lamp. The receptionist at Kravitz and Bellows looked up with a startled blink when Helen walked in without an appointment, without hesitation. She had the binder under one arm, her scarf knotted neatly, her boots still damp from the early morning frost. "I emailed David," she said simply. The receptionist nodded, picking up the phone. "He's in, but just one moment." Helen didn't wait. She moved down the hallway like someone who used to grade term papers in red ink and never forgot how power could live in posture. She reached David Kravitz's door just as he opened it. "Helen," he said, stepping aside, "come in." David's office smelled of old paper and new coffee. Shelves of law books lined the walls, interrupted by black and white photographs of his 3 grown sons. His tie was crooked, his desk half covered in estate case folders. He closed the door behind her. "Have a seat." "I'll stand," Helen replied, placing the binder on his desk. It started. David opened the binder and flipped through the sleeves, nodding as he scanned. "This is solid. She's building a case, though. I'll bet she's trying to have you declared mentally unfit." Helen folded her arms. "Can she?" "Not unless she proves it in court, and even then the burden's high. You'd have to fail multiple competency evaluations, medical, legal, psychological." "She thinks she can force that?" Helen asked, voice low. "She doesn't have to force it," David said, sighing. "Just plant enough doubt. The court will listen to her if it seems like something needs protecting, even if there's nothing to protect from." Helen nodded once, slowly. "Then we stay ahead." She pulled a folded sheet from the side pocket of the binder and slid it across the desk. "I want to update my will. Evan gets the house at 25. Claire is bypassed entirely." David looked up. "That's not a light decision. She stopped being a daughter when she started researching how to evict me." He studied her. "You're certain?" "I'm documented." He didn't argue, just clicked his pen and made a note. "We'll execute it this week." Helen sat now, her hands resting lightly in her lap. "And I want a clause added, power of attorney, but it's locked behind medical verification, not just one doctor. I want a panel, 2 physicians plus a psychologist." "Smart," David said, "tight as it gets." He paused, flipping through the case notes on his desk. "By the way, Claire already had someone do a quiet property appraisal, a private assessor. They didn't file it formally, but I picked up the signal from a real estate alert bot we use to monitor contested trusts." Helen didn't flinch. "So she's circling, like a hawk." "She's already drawn blood," David replied. "This is legal positioning. You don't appraise land unless you plan to fight over it." Helen opened her purse, pulled out the flash drive still in its wrapper. She placed it on his desk. "Miles labeled it for use only if I'm declared incompetent. It's likely a deposition or testimony from him, maybe a timeline, I don't know. I haven't opened it." David turned it over in his hand, nodded. "I'll keep it in trust. We'll log it with a date and seal." She stood. Her body ached, but her stance was unshaken. "Let her play her game. Just make sure we're playing ours better." David rose too. "You're stronger than she thinks." Helen smiled faintly. "That's how I win." She turned to leave, her heels clicking on the hardwood like punctuation marks. The wind had picked up by the time Helen pulled into the driveway. The maple leaves scattered in manic little circles, scratching along the pavement like the start of a whisper war. She stepped out of the car and saw John on the front porch. He was sipping from one of her mugs, the ceramic blue one Miles had bought her for their 30th anniversary. She didn't say anything about it. "Hey," John called out, waving like they were still family. "Glad you're back. I was hoping we could talk." Helen held his gaze for a beat, then nodded once. "Sure." They sat at the kitchen table, the same one that had once held birthday cakes, history books, and science fair posters. Now it was just the two of them and a single coaster between them, which he ignored. "I know Claire's been a little forward," John began. "She's just worried about you." Helen arched an eyebrow. "Worried?" John cleared his throat. "You're alone in this house. It's a lot to manage. Big place, old pipes. And Claire's read some things about, aging in place. It's not always safe." Helen folded her hands. She's welcome to forward me those articles. He gave a weak smile. It's not just about that. We're trying to get ahead of things before it becomes difficult. Difficult for who? Helen asked, tone calm but edged. He hesitated. For everyone. Helen stood and moved to the stove. Would you like some tea, John? He blinked. Sure. She filled the kettle, clicked it on, and opened the pantry. Her eyes landed on a small black audio recorder tucked beside the cookbooks. She'd charged it last night just in case. She pressed the button. Back at the table, she set down the cups and poured the tea. So, she said, you're suggesting I move? Not move, John said quickly. Just downsizing. Maybe into one of those assisted condos in town. It would be more independent for you. Helen tilted her head. So you can be more independent of me? John coughed into his tea. That's not what I meant. Helen smiled. Pleasant, tight. Of course it isn't. John tried again. Claire just wants what's best, and to be honest, I do too. This place could go to a family. Evan's future could be secured. Now. Helen sat back. You think Evan's future depends on this house? Claire does? He said too quickly. Then he corrected. We both do. Helen let that hang in the air. Let it thicken. I'll take it under consideration, she said finally. He nodded, relieved, grateful even. He had no idea what she'd just done. The envelope was thick, unreasonably so. The paper inside smelled faintly of toner and cold intention. Helen sat at the kitchen table, the one where John had tried to sell her on downsizing, and unfolded the letter like it was a puzzle she already knew the answer to. Dear Ms. Porter, it began with grace, polite, measured. But the more she read, the more it felt like a scalpel being drawn, not across skin, but under it. We encourage you to consider a voluntary transition of property control to reduce future complications for yourself and your heirs. While no formal diagnosis exists, age-related decision-making decline can emerge unpredictably. By acting now, you affirm your love for your family and ensure stability across generations. Helen's jaw tensed. Affirm your love for your family, as if love could be notarized. She reached for a pen and underlined 2 phrases. Voluntary transition. No formal diagnosis exists. The words weren't accidental. They were probes. If she responded emotionally, she would look unstable. If she ignored it, they'd twist that silence into justification. A knock at the door broke her focus. She opened it to find Rachel. Shoulder-length hair, wind-tousled, jeans smudged with earth, a canvas tote slung over one arm. She hadn't changed much since Helen last saw her. A little grayer, maybe. A little kinder. You said urgent, Rachel said. I dropped everything. Helen stepped aside. Come in, I need your eyes. They sat together in the sunroom, the letter spread between them, the air thick with old student-teacher shorthand. Rachel scanned the page, then leaned back with a dry laugh. Claire always was elegant with her phrasing. You taught her how to debate. Looks like she finally weaponized it. Helen sighed. And I've got to beat her at her own game. Rachel raised an eyebrow. You planning to argue this in court? Not yet, Helen said. First, I need to disarm her narrative. That afternoon, Helen made 2 calls. The first was to Dr. Carla Mendel, a cognitive specialist David had vetted years ago. They scheduled a full, independent evaluation. Memory, executive function, emotional reasoning. Not because Helen needed to prove herself, but because she needed the receipts. The second call was to the local library. She had a donation to drop off, she told them. A copy of The Art of War, annotated. 3 days later, a camera sat on a tripod in Helen's dining room. She wore a blue blazer and pearl earrings, the same ones from Miles's retirement ceremony. She looked directly into the lens, smiled, not too broadly, and began, My name is Helen Margaret Porter. I am 69 years old, of sound mind and independent living, residing in my legal home of record. She recited the U.S. presidents in reverse order, quoted Shakespeare and Steinbeck, balanced a mock checkbook on camera, and finished with a reading of Do Not Go Gentle into That Good Night. "I do not need assistance," she said quietly. "I need to be left the hell alone." The camera clicked off. That night she printed the final revised copy of her will, the one bypassing Claire entirely and locking Evan's inheritance under Rachel's stewardship until he turned 25. She tucked it between pages 92 and 93 of The Art of War, right under the passage, "Appear weak when you are strong, and strong when you are weak." The spine creaked shut like a secret being sealed. She slid the book into the donation box and wrote in block letters, "For community rotation, adult non-fiction." She dropped it off the next morning. The school pickup line at Ridge Hollow Elementary moved like molasses. SUVs idled, engines hummed low. Mothers scrolled phones, sipping iced coffees too late in the day. Helen waited in her Camry near the far end, where the sycamores shaded the staff parking lot. Evan came out last, backpack sagging, shoelaces trailing, his eyes scanning until they landed on her. He grinned like nothing in the world had changed. She got out and waved. "Grandma." His arms wrapped around her waist. He still smelled like library paste and bubble gum. "Your mom said I could pick you up today," Helen said, brushing hair from his forehead. "Thought we'd get ice cream." "Cool," he chirped, then whispered, "Are you okay?" Helen paused. "Why wouldn't I be?" He glanced down. "No reason." They sat across from each other in a corner booth at Hudson's Creamery, a local haunt painted in faded Americana. Evan had 2 scoops, mint chip and cotton candy, a combination that made no culinary sense but looked like joy in a bowl. Claire arrived halfway through. She walked in briskly, holding a tablet, lips glossed and eyes sharp. She didn't order anything. "I'll sit for a few," she said, slipping into the booth beside Evan. "Just came from a call." Helen stirred her decaf slowly. Claire turned to Evan. "Did you thank Grandma for picking you up?" "I did," he said, eyes still on his bowl. Claire tapped something into her tablet, then glanced at Helen. "He's been doing better with transitions. We're starting a new routine system. Structure helps." Helen smiled faintly. "So does trust." Claire ignored that. "I think Evan mentioned your freezer was acting up again. That's a safety issue, Mom." Helen didn't flinch. "It's been repaired. You'd be amazed what a functioning adult can manage." Claire's eyes narrowed just a fraction. Then, sweetly, "Of course. I just worry." Evan looked between them. Something unspoken pressed in on the edges. He slipped out of the booth to get more napkins. When he returned, he handed Helen one folded into a tight square, hidden beneath the others. She took it without reacting, sliding it into her purse as if it were nothing more than a crumpled receipt. Back at the house, after she dropped Evan off, Helen opened the napkin on the kitchen counter. Scrawled in blue ink, misspelled but unmistakable, "Don't let them take your house." The writing slanted upward, like hope being pulled uphill. Helen pressed the note to her chest, her eyes filled but nothing spilled. She stayed still until the emotion ebbed like a passing tide. Then she picked up her phone. The will was updated that night. Again. Evan remained the beneficiary of the house, but now under ironclad language approved by David and backed by Rachel's trust authority. The trust would mature at age 25. No early disbursements, no loopholes. Claire could claw all she wanted, but the stone was set. Helen mailed a sealed copy to David's office, another to Rachel. The third she placed in a fireproof envelope marked, "Evan's future, do not tamper." The next morning, Claire returned. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You've been awfully busy." Helen didn't pretend to misunderstand. "I've been organized." Claire took a step inside. "John and I filed a notice of concern with the county, under Elder Code. It's not a guardianship petition yet, but it could become one." There it was, the second strike. No more polite suggestions. This was the first real move on the board. Helen met her daughter's gaze. "You've filed against your mother." Claire blinked. "I've acted in Evan's best interest." "No," Helen said calmly. "You acted in your own." Claire's jaw tightened, but she said nothing more, just turned, crisp heels clicking against the tile. The psychiatric office was sterile, quiet. and nothing like Helen imagined. No padded walls or blinking fluorescents, just pale blue walls, a softly humming air purifier, and a water cooler burbling in the corner like it had nothing to do with destroying a person's autonomy. Dr. Carla Mendel's name was etched into a brushed metal plaque on the door. Helen straightened her blazer, adjusted her scarf, and walked in without hesitation. The receptionist handed her a clipboard. "You'll be in room 3. Helen filled out the intake forms in cursive, the same cursive Claire used to mimic as a child when she wanted to forge sick notes, date of birth, known medications, emergency contact. She wrote none. Dr. Mendel entered 5 minutes later, mid-40s, blazer over jeans, a quiet steadiness in her eyes. "I reviewed the court order," she said, taking a seat across from Helen. "And I reviewed your voluntary file as well. Impressive prep." "I used to be a teacher," Helen said. "I know how tests work. It's not just about what you know, it's about how you sit." Mendel smiled faintly. "Let's begin." The questions started easy. "What year is it?" Helen answered. "Who is the current president?" Helen responded. "Count backward from 100 by 7s. Helen did. Then she did it again in 5s, just to see if the doctor was paying attention. She was. Then came the abstraction tests. What does it mean when someone says, "Don't cry over spilled milk"? Helen didn't hesitate. "It means regret is a useless exercise unless you're planning to learn from it." Dr. Mendel's pen paused mid-note. They moved to storytelling, pattern recall, ethical hypotheticals. At one point, Helen quoted King Lear when prompted with a moral dilemma involving betrayal. "When we are born, we cry that we are come to this great stage of fools," she said, voice cool. "Shakespeare didn't believe in happy endings, just endings." Mendel chuckled. "That wasn't on the test. Consider it extra credit." The final segment was timed writing, 3 sentences of reflection. Helen used hers to describe the moment she and Miles planted the magnolia tree that now towered beside the house. She ended her paragraph with, "Love doesn't rot a brain, grief might, but I've lived through both." After the test, Dr. Mendel sat quietly, flipping pages. Then she closed the file and looked up. "You're the most competent person I've seen this week," she said. "Possibly this year." Helen exhaled. Not relief, not pride. Just the sound of someone checking off a box they were never meant to be in. "Thank you," she said. "I assume that goes in your report." Dr. Mendel nodded. "In bold." The next day, the evaluation packet landed on the judge's desk. The results were ironclad. Helen had passed every metric, cognitive, emotional, practical. With scores so far above average, the court clerk had called David to confirm they weren't misprinted. Claire was not pleased. In the hallway outside the courthouse clerk's office, she cornered David. "She's manipulating the exam," Claire hissed. "She studied for it. That's not real cognition, it's performance." David tilted his head. "Claire, if you're trying to prove your mother is mentally compromised by showing how well she plans ahead, I'd advise you to stop speaking." Claire's cheeks flushed. "This isn't over." "No," David said. "It's just starting." Helen had always been an archivist. Not by profession, but by instinct. Old birthday cards, grocery lists in Miles's handwriting, report cards, receipts. Paper trails were a comfort. Proof that something once happened, that it had been real. Now, that habit would save her. She spread the documents across her dining room table like a jigsaw puzzle only she could see. Voicemails from Claire saying she was too slammed to stop by. Holiday emails with subject lines like "can't make it again." Text messages where Claire delayed visits, canceled plans, or asked Helen to avoid confusing Evan with outdated stories. She opened her old laptop and scrolled through calendar entries. Christmas dinners crossed out, birthdays unacknowledged. Photos of her table set for 3, only 1 plate ever touched. All of it dated, all of it pattern. She forwarded every file to David in an encrypted batch labeled "Isolation Pattern." Porter case. Peter, David's paralegal, called the next morning. "I went through the whole archive," he said. It's subtle, but it's there. Gradual emotional disconnection, consistent with preparatory alienation. Prep for what? Helen asked, though she knew. For what they're doing now, Peter said, cutting you out, piece by piece. He sent back a neatly formatted timeline, each entry with a source file, a date, and a quote. Helen read it all, hands steady, breath slow. Then she printed 2 copies, one for court, one for herself. Later that afternoon, Rachel arrived with a stack of her own, emails between her and Claire. At first they were mundane, updates on Evan, PTA gossip, but over time the tone darkened. You can't reason with her anymore, Claire had written in one. She's too stubborn to see what's best. She's not herself lately. Rachel slid the stack toward Helen. I'm willing to testify. Helen looked up. That could strain things with the rest of the PTA. Rachel smiled. They were never that interesting anyway. That night, while cleaning out a small trash can in the upstairs guest room, Helen found something new. A printed Google search. Claire must have thrown it away without shredding. Helen smoothed the paper flat on the bathroom counter. Can you sue a parent for house value after death? Below it, in faded ink. If a will changes after mental decline, can it be contested? Helen stared at it, then took a photo, then 3. David added the search to the evidence packet. Inferred intent, he said. That's legal gold. Helen didn't reply. She was staring out the window at the magnolia tree, remembering the day Miles had planted it. It bloomed too early every year, like it couldn't wait to remind the world it was alive. That evening, Helen sat on the edge of Evan's bed, reading him Charlotte's Web. His room was dim, filled with soft breath sounds and the rustle of sheets. She watched his eyelids droop, his fingers still curled around the edge of the blanket. Before leaving, she reached into her bag and pulled out a new notebook, spiral-bound, plain cover. She titled the first page, The House That Didn't Move, by Grandma H.P., and began to write. It was drizzling the morning of the hearing. Not enough to require an umbrella, just enough to make everything feel a little heavier. Helen wore a charcoal wool coat, the one she used to save for school board meetings. Her binder was tucked under one arm, her heels low and solid on the courthouse steps. David met her at the entrance. You ready? Helen didn't answer. She just nodded, stepped inside, and walked down the hall as if she belonged there, because she did. The courtroom was modest. Wood-paneled walls, an American flag in the corner, and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look more tired than they were. A few observers scattered along the benches, local lawyers, maybe a reporter. Rachel sat near the back, a manila folder on her lap. Claire and John were already at their table. Claire wore navy, hair slicked into a bun. No jewelry except a wedding band and small pearl studs, every inch curated to read devoted daughter. John looked down mostly, occasionally adjusting his tie. He didn't meet Helen's eyes. The judge entered. Gavel. Introductions. Then Claire was called first. She took the stand and transformed. Her voice softened. Her eyes moistened. She told the court she loved her mother, that she'd only ever wanted what was best, that Helen had become increasingly withdrawn, erratic, suspicious. She mentioned missed appointments, emotional episodes, her reluctance to trust professionals. We noticed cognitive shifts, she said. Not big ones, just flickers, enough to raise concerns. David didn't interrupt. He let her talk. Let her spin her tapestry of worry. Then she folded her hands and said, We just wanted to protect her from herself. Helen didn't move. Her hands remained folded in her lap. But the corners of her mouth twitched, just barely. Then it was Helen's turn. She took the stand slowly, deliberately. Her voice didn't shake. She began by naming the medications she wasn't on, the surgeries she hadn't needed. Then she described clearly and calmly the smear of emotional distancing that began 3 years ago. She presented the letters. The real estate assessment Claire commissioned in secret. The voicemail that said, We'll make it look voluntary. The signed health form John submitted under her name. Then she paused, looked directly at the judge. And this, she said, holding up the paper Claire had printed and trashed. "Can you sue a parent for house value after death?" A murmur spread through the courtroom. David rose and submitted the physical evidence. "Recovered from the trash can in the guest room," he said. "Time-stamped photo attached, backed up to secure cloud storage," Helen continued. "I underwent a full mental capacity evaluation with an independent specialist, scored in the 98th percentile, all records submitted in advance." The judge nodded, flipping through the sealed evaluation file already in the docket. Then Rachel took the stand. She spoke not just as a neighbor, but as a former teacher, someone who had watched Helen shape lives. "I've seen the kind of cognitive erosion that makes people unsafe," she said. "Helen isn't just lucid, she's deliberate." She shared Claire's emails, read them aloud. The phrasing, the implications, the erosion of dignity through passive language. Then came Peter, walking the court through the isolation timeline. He outlined, date by date, how Claire and John had distanced Helen from community, routine, and even health services. "She's not imagining this," he said. "It was orchestrated." Finally, David played the audio. John's voice. "We just want to get ahead of things. Maybe move you somewhere easier." Claire. "More independent. For all of us." Helen's voice. Steady as steel. "So you can be more independent of me." The silence after the recording was the loudest sound in the room. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Porter, your daughter's petition suggests you are no longer capable of managing your estate, and that continued possession of the property places you at risk." Helen met his gaze. "That risk comes from them, Your Honor, not from the deed." The judge tapped his pen, then leaned back. "I find," he said, "that the petition was made not out of genuine concern for Helen Porter's well-being, but as a strategic and manipulative effort to gain premature control of her estate." He turned to Claire. "As such, I am granting Helen Porter full and exclusive rights over her estate, permanently revoking any future claims or guardianship considerations from Claire Porter Wells or Jonathan Wells." Claire blinked. Once, twice, her face collapsed inward without falling apart. John looked like he wanted to melt through the floor. David leaned over to Helen and whispered, "We just hit checkmate." Helen didn't smile. She just breathed. The judgment came in writing 2 days later, black ink on white paper, dense with legal language, but Helen only needed one sentence. Petition denied. Estate and decision-making power remains solely and irrevocably with Helen Margaret Porter. Below that, in smaller print, future claims from Claire Porter Wells or Jonathan Wells are precluded from consideration. She stared at the page for a full minute, then set it on the table and folded her hands. Not in prayer, not in relief, but in stillness. The kind of stillness that arrives only after something loud and long has ended. David met her the next day in his office. This time she didn't come with a binder. Just one manila envelope. "She didn't just try to remove me," Helen said, placing the envelope on his desk. "She tried to erase me, and in doing that, she erased herself," David finished. Helen nodded. "Let's make it formal." Inside the envelope, the final draft of her will. Updated, notarized, signed. Claire's name appeared nowhere in it. Not as heir, not as backup, not as contingency. Just gone. They filed it immediately. Later that afternoon, David made a quiet call to the state bar regarding Caleb Wells, the attorney who'd enabled Claire's petition. Within hours, a notice was issued to his office, formal inquiry into ethical conduct related to elder law proceedings. David showed Helen the confirmation on his phone. "At minimum, he'll be sanctioned." "Good," Helen said. "He doesn't get to bury his hands in the dirt and walk away clean." That weekend, Helen sat beneath the magnolia tree with a thermos of tea and Miles's old fountain pen. The deed to the house now lay within a protective trust, insulated, layered, impossible to touch without a full court override. Rachel had helped draft the language herself. Helen ran her fingers over the thick embossed paper. Legal armor, quiet power. Then she opened a blank notebook and began drafting a proposal. The title, The Miles Porter Fund for Elder Housing Advocacy. It would start small, a $25,000 seed donation from her own savings, plus residual contributions from the estate upon her passing, scholarships for legal education in elder protection, grants for seniors navigating guardianship threats, no strings, just security. She wrote the first check before the sun set. David called Monday. "Everything's filed," he said. "The trust, the fund, the will, you're ironclad." "Good," Helen said. Then she paused. "Do you think she'll come back?" she asked quietly. David was silent a moment. "Not legally, not soon. And emotionally?" "I can't advise on that," he said. Helen exhaled through her nose. "Didn't think so." That night she sat at the kitchen table with a copy of the final will beside her. On the cover she had handwritten in soft blue ink, "The legacy of the house." She didn't cry. There were no tears left for Claire. But she did pour a second cup of tea, light a candle beside Miles's photo, and whisper, "I did it." The house was quieter now, not because anyone had left, but because something had. Some low-grade current of tension, a hum of watching eyes or unspoken threat, gone. And what replaced it wasn't peace exactly, it was vacancy, a hollow space where fear had lived. Helen filled it deliberately. She planted hyacinths near the mailbox. Started waking early again, not out of anxiety, but out of choice. She began baking bread for the first time in years, not from a mix, but from scratch, elbows dusted with flour, dough rising beneath clean tea towels. She read the paper with her coffee, front to back, crossword in pen. The postcard sat inside a sealed Ziploc bag in her file drawer, logged with David under unsolicited communication. She hadn't mentioned it to Evan, or Rachel, or anyone really. Let them keep throwing pebbles at the fortress. The deed was sealed. The house would outlast the tantrum. Claire didn't call, not once, but the internet spoke for her. Helen didn't follow Claire on social media, hadn't in years, but Rachel did. And Rachel screenshot everything. A filtered selfie in soft lighting, captioned, "Sometimes those closest to you are the ones who cut deepest." A photo of Evan's old art project from kindergarten with, "Some people forget who they're fighting for." Helen scrolled through them once, expressionless. She didn't comment, didn't react. It wasn't cowardice, it was clarity. You didn't fight ghosts. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, Helen started volunteering at the Willow Bend Senior Center. Most days, she served coffee, arranged books, helped folks fill out confusing state benefit forms. But once a week, she offered something else, a free 1-hour session on asset protection for late-life independence. She stood at a whiteboard and answered questions about wills, power of attorney, and signs of undue influence. The room was usually packed. Most of the attendees weren't worried about their minds failing. They were worried about their children deciding they already had. One afternoon, a woman in a teal cardigan raised her hand. Her eyes were soft but sad. "Did your daughter help you get justice?" Helen looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "She inspired it." But she didn't help. There were quiet nods around the room, not of judgment, of recognition. That evening, Helen returned home to a kitchen that smelled like cinnamon and oranges. Her newest loaf had cracked just slightly across the top, the way her mother's used to. She sliced the end off and buttered it while it was still warm. She took her plate into the living room. The floor creaked where it always creaked. The old heating vent rattled once, then settled. She sat with the lights low, wrapped in the old plaid blanket Miles had refused to throw out, even when the edges frayed. The fireplace flickered with a soft blue flame. The silence now didn't ache. It just existed. Helen didn't flinch when she opened her email the next morning and saw the subject line, "Notice of complaint filed. Alleged threat of retaliatory action." It wasn't from a lawyer. It wasn't even properly formatted. But the metadata led David to a burner domain, newly purchased, anonymously routed, traced through a familiar pattern. Claire. David called within the hour. "We'll prepare a response anyway," he said. "Paper walls still block wind." Helen didn't ask what the complaint alleged. She just said, "Make it airtight." By the end of the week, David had assembled a full binder of documentation: timeline, testimony, audio, evidence of harassment post-verdict, every page sealed in plastic, every footnote cross-referenced. A second copy sat in Helen's kitchen drawer, labeled in her steady handwriting, "If needed, bring this." They never did, because Claire never filed. No judge, no court, no lawsuit. Just silence again. But this one was colder. The silence didn't win. The following Tuesday, Helen stood before a packed rec room at Willow Bend Senior Center. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Rows of folding chairs creaked beneath strangers who shared the same quiet fear, being erased before they were even gone. She held a printed booklet in her hand. No title on the cover, just a magnolia tree embossed in silver ink. "My name is Helen," she began. "I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a social worker, I'm someone who was nearly rewritten. And I'm still here." She walked through the basics: power of attorney structures, estate protection, emotional boundary setting. But what they leaned into, what they held on to, was her story, not the names. Those were changed. So were the dates, the details, but the shape of it, the betrayal, the prep work, the courtroom, the silence after, it was all there. Toward the end, she glanced to the back of the room. Evan sat beside Rachel. His feet didn't touch the floor. His eyes never left her. Helen closed the booklet. "I survived because I documented," she said, "but I healed because I told the truth." That night, Rachel published an excerpt from the anonymized story in the Hudson Valley Gazette. It was the centerpiece of the Sunday Life and Legacy section. The headline read, "They tried to disappear her. She wrote her way back." The byline, "Written by someone they tried to disappear." The article spread faster than Helen expected. By Tuesday, 3 senior centers had reached out requesting permission to reprint the guide. A college civics class asked her to speak via Zoom. Even the local councilwoman called, offering to fund a small print run of the booklet as part of elder protection outreach. Helen declined the speaking request, but she agreed to the print run, on one condition: every copy must stay free. Helen stared at the fence for 2 full days before repainting it. She didn't scrub the red spray paint, didn't power wash it out of existence. She painted over it, thick, matte white, like layers of truth laid calmly atop fury. No drama, no announcement, just reclaiming the surface, inch by inch. She thought about pressing charges. David left her the number for a detective at the county office, told her the ball was in her court, but Helen didn't call, because something inside her had shifted. They had called her a liar. She had responded by writing everything down, and now she was going to do it again. The domain was simple: diuda.notgoneyet.org. The first post went live on a Sunday morning under a photo of the magnolia tree. "Welcome. My name is Helen. This isn't about vengeance. This is about memory. Not the kind that fades. The kind people try to erase while you're still using it. I'm here. I'm still here." Each week, she added one new chapter. They weren't just essays. They were letters. Sharp, clean, bone deep, on resilience, aging, legal self-defense, chosen silence, and the grief of being betrayed by someone you once held as a baby. Some chapters were soft. Stories about miles, about books read during long winters, about baking bread to feel like a person again. Others were blunt. How to survive your child's lawsuit. When they smile and call it protection. Documents are love notes in disguise. Helen didn't promote the blog. She didn't need to. By the end of the first month, traffic had grown beyond her zip code. Readers left comments signed, "Still here too, not forgotten," and "They tried with me, but they failed." One evening, after reading a new post aloud to Evan, the one about how to speak clearly in court when your voice wants to shake, he pulled out a folded sheet of sketch paper from his backpack. On it, a drawing of a magnolia tree. Beneath it, block letters in red crayon, "Not gone yet." Helen looked at him. That's the cover. For what? She smiled. The first collection. She published it as a free e-book, a slim volume titled Not Gone Yet, Letters from the Line They Drew in the Sand. She offered it to libraries, to senior centers, to retirement homes. The download page had no paywall, no email capture, no clickbait, just a button that said, "Read, remember, stay." 3 days after the ebook went live, an email appeared in her inbox. From clarepw@gmail.com. Subject, none. Body, you've made your point. That was it. No signature, no apology, no threat. Just the rustle of someone trying to shut a door they'd broken down themselves. Helen didn't reply. She didn't even mark it unread. She archived it, not out of fear or anger, but because some endings don't need a response. The kitchen table had always been unremarkable. Oak, 4 chairs, a scratch on the left leg from the time Claire had dropped her backpack too hard, back when she was still in braces and afraid of thunderstorms. Now it was something else, not sacred, but solid. Helen sat at its edge in a soft cardigan and wool socks, steam curling from her coffee mug. On the table, her leather-bound journal, the sealed deed to the house, and a pen with fading gold trim. The essentials. Everything else could wait. Photos lined the nearby wall. Miles in flannel, holding up a trout he never quite cleaned properly. Evan grinning through missing teeth, surrounded by Legos. A few snapshots from school plays, birthday mornings, the orchard in late fall. Claire appeared in them too, younger, smaller, grinning into a world that hadn't hardened yet. Helen didn't turn them away. She let the images stay. Memory wasn't loyalty. It was evidence. Above the doorframe hung a framed quote Rachel had given her after the court ruling, printed in typewriter font on cream linen paper. Be the ancestor they fight for, not against. Helen had hung it high enough that she had to tilt her chin to read it. Every time she passed through, she did. That morning's mail came late, a soft thunk at the bottom of the box. Mixed in with a grocery flyer and a water bill was a pale blue envelope. Handwritten return address. No name. She brought it inside, opened it with a butter knife, and unfolded the letter slowly, like something living. Dear Ms. Porter, you don't know me, but I read your blog. I followed every chapter like it was church. I thought I was crazy until you described what my daughter did to me. Word for word. I used your checklist. I showed my lawyer. I kept my house. You saved me. If no one else ever tells you, please hear it from me. You mattered. Thank you. Lillian D., age 73. Helen folded the letter neatly, smoothing the creases twice. Then she opened the drawer where her final will sat. Next to it she placed the letter. No ceremony, no speech, just side by side, like the two pieces belonged together. Outside, the wind moved through the sycamores. The magnolia tree was in bloom again, early, as always. Helen watched its branches sway, petals blinking pale pink against a gray sky. The house didn't feel silent anymore. It felt attentive, as if waiting. She took one last sip of coffee, then uncapped her pen. In the margins of her journal, she wrote, "Legacy isn't what you leave behind when you're gone. It's what stands because you stayed." The grass at Rose Hill Cemetery was wet from morning dew, and the wind hummed through the trees like something remembering. Helen moved slowly now, not frail, just deliberate. Evan walked beside her. A respectful silence stretched between them, as natural as the sky above. She carried no flowers, just her journal, a folded scarf, and the envelope marked, "Evan," still unopened. She hadn't brought it to the kitchen table. She hadn't read it under lamplight. She had carried it here, to where answers belonged in whispers, not declarations. They reached Miles's headstone, weather-softened granite with clean, serif lettering. Miles A., Porter, loving husband, patient teacher, keeper of the line. Helen placed her hand against the stone, fingers spread like memory. "I kept it safe," she said quietly. "The house, the promise, all of it." She stood there a long time, then knelt, slowly, gently, and tucked the sealed envelope beneath the stone's edge, where wind and rain wouldn't reach. I don't need to open it, she said aloud. If it was meant for Evan, then it's not mine to hold. Later, they sat on a weathered bench near the willow trees, the sun now warming the stone paths. Evan, 15 and taller now, stretched his legs long in front of him. His hair was longer, his shoulders broadening, but his eyes, still his mother's, still soft, still searching. He looked down at his sneakers. I don't remember him, Grandpa. Helen smiled. That's okay. He remembers you. They sat with that a moment. Then Evan asked, Do you think Claire will ever come back? Helen didn't answer at first. She watched a bird dart across the sky. Fast, sharp, gone. She made her choice, Helen finally said. Some doors don't lock from the outside. She knew where I was. He nodded. They walked back to the car together. Slow, unhurried. A kind of ritual in reverse. Inside the glove box, Helen had tucked her latest copy of the will. The real one, not the printout. Evan opened it, curious, flipping through until he landed near the signature page. Is this the one that counts? He asked. The only one, she replied. He turned it toward her. You left her out completely. Helen looked at the blank space where Claire's name might have been. There was no place left to put her, she said. Not after what she tried to take. Evan was quiet. Then, love is inherited, right? Helen looked at him, her jaw tightening slightly. Yes, she said. So is cruelty. She chose which one to pass down. They sat with that for a moment, the car silent around them. Then Evan turned toward her, face serious. Will I be a good man? Helen reached over, tucked a strand of hair behind his ear, like she used to when he was 5 and learning to read. You already are, she said. But yes, you will be, because you saw what happens when you forget who gave you everything.